Okay, hi again, everybody. Rachel Ackerman was supposed to give this this presentation. Rachel wasn't able to be here, so I apologize. You're all stuck with me. It's working. Okay, what we're going to do in the frame of the in the progression of the. I think we still got a problem. In the progression of the year-long course we're giving in family therapy. So what we're doing right now is. Can I just speak without this? It's really annoying. Okay, what we're can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. What we're doing right now is we're moving from the purely theoretical part of the course to the part of the course that is going to integrate theory into integrate practice into the theory. Now, the truth of the matter is that to an extent that most people don't recognize, in your normal practice, you are already integrating theory. And every conceptual choice or every practice choice you make is underlined by a theoretical underpinning that you may or may not be aware of. And so the first part of this presentation, what I'd like to do during this first part of the presentation is to go through some of the theories that we have that have been covered here, some theories that haven't been covered here, and show how the practice decisions that these theories make are guided by the theory that underlies them. Specifically, what we're going to look at is who is seen in therapy. Each gisha, each perspective, each therapeutic approach has guidelines of who is seen from the family. And who is seen is always underlined, is always guided by the basic principles of whatever approach we're talking about in ways that we don't really even recognize. Again, so I'm starting off this way because the decisions that we make in therapy are always guided. I want to make the point that they're always guided by theory, whether or not we are recognizing it. Now, in the second part of the presentation, what I'm going to do is present an approach for the assessment of families that was developed here at the Family Institute. Is used primarily in our children's unit, Pinat Hayeled, and it is a way of assessing families when they first come into therapy and guiding conceptualizations. And based on those conceptualizations, making practice decisions. I hope to have time at the end of the presentation to take you through an actual assessment that I've recently done and show step by step how the assessment is done and how the conceptualization was made and therefore and thereby what how that guided the treatment plan. So in my previous presentations, what I asked was to hold questions till I pause. Actually, in this one, I'd prefer to do it differently. This presentation, I think, will go a little bit better if it's more interactive. If you raise your hands and ask questions as we go along, especially as we get to the part, especially when we get to part 2, where I'm presenting the assessment protocol. So please ask me questions as we go along because this will be a little bit better if it's more interactive. Okay, so what we're going to start with is taking a look at different theories, doing a quick 2-minute review of them, and then seeing how those translate into practice. So let's start with Bowen theory. So in Bowen theory and in Bowen therapy, what is unique about it in terms of practice, or one of the things that are unique about it in practice, what distinguishes it, is that either you have only the parents involved, or you have only one, or you only have one person involved. Now, why would that be? Now, based on what you know about Bowen theory, why would that be? You can take a look at the screen, and you might be able to figure it out also. But why? So let's ask this question a little bit differently. Again, I told you this. I'm going to make demands of you. I told you this would be interactive. Why in Bowen theory would you assume that children would not be invited or would not be a part of the therapy? Right, exactly. I repeat it. I'll repeat it. Don't worry. What was said is that children may have a lower level of differentiation or a minimal ability to differentiate, and that's true. Differentiation is based on the premise that we can differentiate thoughts and feelings. Children are not really able to do that, or are able to do that in a way that is frankly impaired. And so, primarily for that reason, Bowen doesn't introduce children into therapy. At the outset of his career, Bowen would meet with entire families, and what he wrote about that was that it was good for making people feel good in the moment, but it didn't really make any lasting changes. And the reason, again, that Bowen would say that it doesn't make any lasting changes is because, according to Bowen, lasting permanent changes occur when people change their basic level of differentiation. And children don't need to be part of that process. Now, the other piece that this is based on is that, according to Bowen, children don't need to be there, because Bowen's basic premise is that when one member of the family changes their basic level of differentiation, when one member of the family can separate thoughts and feelings in a way that is categorically different from how they did it before, that will cause a ripple effect whereby there will be a change in the entire family. Right? When one person changes their functioning based on a change in differentiation, the rest of the family will have to adapt accordingly. So again, when Bowen is making when Bowen invites either one adult in the family or both parents in the family, it's coming from the basic theoretical underpinning of differentiation, of change through differentiation. So let's move on and talk about Minuchin. So in structural family therapy, at least at the outset, and really the primary mode of intervention, is that everybody is involved. Right? Minuchin wants a classic structural therapist would insist on the entire family being there, at least for the initial session, but usually even beyond that. Now, based on what we know about structural family therapy, why would that be important? Why would it be important to have everybody there? Mm-hmm. Right, because what is, according to according to Minuchin, what is the fundamental catalyst of change is not when there's intrapsychic change. Minuchin is unconcerned with that. Minuchin would feel that intrapsychic change is unquantifiable and unobservable. For Minuchin, what is important is actual changes in the structure of the family. When the structure of the family changes, then you will have consequent intrapsychic change. Now, if you need to change the structure of the family, then it follows that you need to have the entire family there. And again, I want to emphasize this point. If you want to change the structure of the family, then there needs to be an experiential change within the room, within the consultation room, within the presence of the therapist, that will enact the change in the behavior, in the dynamics of the family, which will then lead to intrapsychic change. And so therefore, you need the presence of everyone in the family. You can't just work with the parents, because you'll be missing the basic structure. I think one of the other models that was covered here was the satir model. Now, in satir is an interesting theory in that it both focuses on experiential change as well as intrapsychic change. Satir was very focused on creating experiential changes in the room, but was also interested in what goes on inside of people. Right? When Satir spoke about concepts like self-esteem, that's a concept that Minuchin really would never use. Right? Minuchin, you can't quantify self-esteem. You can't observe self-esteem. So why talk about it and why try to enact changes there? Now again, so because Satir sees change coming through both an intrapsychic component and an interpersonal component, so in the Satir model, the preference is for the entire family to be there, right? Satir was a systemic therapist. Satir also believed in the idea of change in one part of the family dynamic, influencing the rest of the family as well. But individual therapy is not irrelevant in a Satir model. Why? Because Satir also was focused on the intrapsychic component of what constitutes personality and how change is developed. So you have systemic and intrapsychic change through what in Satir would talk. Satir, working off of Rogers, would call enhanced congruence. Now, in the attachment therapies are interesting because attachment therapies you have attachment therapies that recommend seeing the entire family, but in most attachment therapies are actually mostly focused on the dyad. Okay, I'll ask you again. What about attachment would lead to a focus on the dyad as opposed to the necessity of seeing the entire family?
They believe that the attachment with the child and the parent figure is what counts.
Right. What is most important is the attachment between the child and the parent figure, and what attachment theorists what attachment therapists are looking at is the nuanced moment-to-moment experience between child and caregiver. Right, that the nuance, the subtle interactions between the child and the caregiver are what lead to secure attachment and psychological health. And so the area with which attachment therapists are looking to where they're looking to intervene is on those on those specific interactions that will lead to nurturance, that will lead to congruence and attunement. And so even attachment therapists that might pay attention to the structure of the family and believe in the systemic nature of the systemic nature of the family system are going to see the potential for growth, the potential for change is located in the dyad of the parent-child dyad, or in the couple's dyad. Right. So, for example, if we compare EFT to structural family therapy, Minuchin, even when there's a couple's problem, would be most interested in seeing the entire family, at least at the outset, because the relationship between the couple influences and is influenced by the interactions of the rest of the family. An EFT therapist, an emotionally focused therapist, would concentrate mostly on the nature of the interaction between the couple. How does the couple communicate? What type of emotions can the couple share with each other and be aware of? And so again, in the attachment therapies, you are having the change comes through a relational intervention, less of a systemic intervention, more of a relational intervention that then may have influence on the system. Now, if we go beyond this, if we go outside of the realm of family therapy, if a child comes in and parents come in and say, my child is having problems, a child-centered play therapist is going to take an entirely different approach. Because where does the child-centered play therapist locate the problem? The child-centered play therapist would locate the problem in a falseness of the child's self, in a lack of congruence that can be mostly addressed through an individual relationship with a therapist. The therapist needs that safe space to work with in order to facilitate the child's freer emotional expression and greater capacity for congruence. The parents don't need to be involved in that. There doesn't need to be or more specifically, there doesn't need to be intervention on the level of the system in order to enact or to facilitate that change. Now, what's interesting here is that later on, is that in the 70s and 80s, there was a popular approach to therapy called filial therapy. Now, in filial therapy, what the therapist would do is they would teach they would bring in the parents and the child and teach the therapist how to do child-centered play therapy with their child. So the parent would come in and together with the child, and it would essentially be lessons about how to do child-centered play therapy with their child. Now again, this is not a systemic intervention. The child-centered play therapist doing filial therapy is not looking at a systemic problem in the family. They're looking at they're still focused mostly on the child and the inability of the child to express themselves in a congruent way. What the filial therapist will take from family therapy is the need and the effectiveness of having the parent be the one that facilitates this process within the child. But again, it's not based on a systemic outlook or a belief in the circular causality of the family. Now, again, if we keep on moving outside of family therapy, the psychoanalytic play therapist is going to take a completely opposite approach. The psychoanalytic play therapist is going to look at parents as hindrances to the therapy. Why? Because the psychoanalytic therapist will look at the problems in the child on a purely intrapsychic level. Right? The psychoanalytic therapist is going to look at any dysfunction that the child presents with, or difficulties in the personality or difficulties in behavior. The classically psychoanalytic play therapist will look at that as a manifestation of internal conflict, purely. Right? There's a conflict between the id and the ego the id and the superego that the ego is having trouble managing, or there is the child's fantasy with a PH is creating levels of aggression that the ego can no longer manage, and the way to address that is through the transference and interpretation that exists within an individual relationship with the child. So, for example, I think I told this story when I talked about attachment theory. Melanie Klein forbid her supervisees from meeting with parents. Right? It's not that she didn't encourage them. She forbade her supervisees from seeing parents, because seeing parents would be, number one, useless, but number two, counterproductive in that it would interfere with the transference that's created between child and parent, between child and therapist. So again, there's very, very few people who work like this nowadays, but I want to give this as some context in terms of how theory frames the clinical decisions that we make. And finally, if we're looking at a purely behavioral approach, the behavioral therapist is usually going to meet with the parents. Why would that be? Again, I'll turn to you here as well. What's the behavioral therapist looking for? Sorry? Right, they're looking, right, so if there's a cognitive focus, right, they might be looking at learning. Sorry? Observation, right? Well, observations are going to frame the way that they intervene. But behaviorists are looking at people purely based on conditioning. Right? Children are conditioned to do certain actions, and the people that are in charge or that can influence the conditioning are the parents. If the incentives are changed, then the child's behavior will be changed as well. So there's really no reason for children to be involved in any type of behavioral intervention. Well, the only people that are necessary are parents in order to change the incentives and to change the conditioning and therefore the behavior in the child. Okay, so this was again this introduction is here to. I began with this introduction to highlight the ways in which theory influences our decision making. Now, we all, even before we learn theory very well, we all have inclinations as to who we should see, how we should see, what parts of the system we should intervene on. We have intuitions that are based on theoretical assumptions. Where we picked up those theoretical assumptions, okay, that's a question. But the theory is what got the theoretical assumptions that are sometimes just intuitive is what formulates and what frames our clinical decisions. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into a way of working with families, or more particularly a way of assessing families. Are there any questions about what we've done up until now? I know I sort of ran through this. Any questions about what we've done up until now before we move into the next part? Yeah.
So if I would start seeing families, do I have to decide more or less like which way I go, or can I just say I'm going to see each family on its own, how to orient myself, or which type of
So I think I heard your question. I think what I heard was if I'm going to start seeing families, can I sort of just begin seeing them, and sort of be eclectic with the theories that I use, or do I need to choose a specific theory that I'm going to work with?
This family, I'm using this theory and I'm sticking to this type, or can I be like mixing and matching?
Okay. So again, the question is should I be mixing and matching, or can I be mixing and matching, or do I need to say I'm using this theory to see this family? This is one of like the questions in family theory and really in psychotherapy in general. Now, the fact of the matter is that there are very, very, very few therapists who work dogmatically or in an orthodox way. Fran presented you Bowen, and I think she's really one of the only people I know that are sort of orthodox in their approach. For the most part, therapists are eclectic in what they use. Now, if we think about the importance of theory, therapeutic intervention will be more effective when it is based on a principled outlook of how we see the human condition and how families operate. Now, it doesn't mean that we need to say we need to develop our own theory, or I'm going to integrate every theory and have the Ganz theory. What it does mean, and it also doesn't mean that when we're sitting with families, we should be thinking, Bowen says this, and Minuchin says this, and attachment would say this, and I'm going to make a decision about which one I'm going to use. Theory, the way that I always think about theory, and I guess I appreciate the question because I think this is a very, very good way of sort of ending the section on theory and moving into practice. Theory works best when it exists and when it's placed like right here. theory should be in the back of our minds and should be guiding what we are doing, even if we're not saying I am working based on a psychoanalytic frame right now. What we should be able to do is in moments of calm, or when we are not seeing our clients, or when we're in supervision, we should be able to say, this was my intuition and I can understand where it's coming from right now. This is where this is what I'm thinking, and it's based on this theory. This is what I was saying when I was talking about our clinical interventions always being based on theory. Our clinical interventions are always based on theory, but they should be based on actual theory, and not sort of what we've picked up in a self-help book here, or from our grandmother over there. They should be based on principles that we have learned and that we can conceptualize and articulate. So again, I'll try to sort of get back to your question. Therapists should have a robust knowledge of theory. We should know a number of theories very, very well. We don't need to be, what they should not be doing is when you're sitting with a family, you shouldn't be thinking, what would Bowen do right now? Or what would Minuchin, definitely you shouldn't be, what would Minuchin do right now? I always joke, this past summer when I was teaching at Smith, so I had to brush up on Minuchin, and so I read through a bunch of his books and his articles, and whenever I do that, whenever I sort of take a Minuchin dive, my practice, I always make really terrible mistakes in practice, because you inevitably try to emulate him and you fall well flat or well short of what he was aiming at. So definitely don't emulate Minuchin. But more than that, we shouldn't be when we're sitting with clients. Therapy should be an organic process, and so we shouldn't be saying, what would such and such do? What is appropriate to do within this theory? But we should know theory well enough that it's sitting back here and it guides our approaches automatically and inevitably. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Nobody wants to ask a question while I pour my coffee? Okay. So what we're going to do now is go through an approach to assessment. This is the approach that I use in my own practice. It is appropriate for the approach that I'm going to articulate is really mostly appropriate for child-focused cases, child cases and teen cases, where you have parents coming in and saying, we're having trouble with our kid, our 5-year-old, we're having trouble with our 10-year-old, we're having trouble with our 16-year-old. Now, again, this is the approach that I'm articulating is not an approach that is universal. Lots of people disagree with it, so you could take it for what it's worth. But it's an approach that I found useful, particularly for child-focused cases, in that it doesn't. One of the problems with classical family therapy techniques is that it doesn't address when parents come in with a problem around the child. It is you create almost an inevitable clash between the therapist's perspective and the parent's perspective, when the parents are coming in and saying, "I want you to see my child," and the therapist says, "No, I need to see the entire family." The approach that I'm going to outline is a way of managing this, the potential clash between the outlooks of the parents and of the therapist. Okay, so usually what happens when you have a child-focused case is parents call the therapist and they say something to the extent of, "I can't manage with such and such. I can't manage with my daughter. I can't manage with my son." Over the phone, they'll often try to get into great detail as to what's going on. Again, this is just sort of very basic practice, which I'm sure you all are well aware of. The phone's not a good forum for getting into deep discussions, and it's good practice to cut off parents after 2 or 3 minutes of background. Again, it's important to do this in a way that's empathic and nice and kind. But it's good practice to cut parents off after a couple of minutes. Again, recognize that parents are in that initial phone call. Parents are coming in with massive anxiety. There are very few things that are more difficult to deal with than a problematic child, and you can assume that you have not been that the phone call to you as a therapist has come after a lot of consternation, discussion, mental anguish, and it's important to be empathic to that reality. What I tell parents over the phone, again, unless they get into if parents, all things being equal, I tell parents the first step of this process is I need to meet with you and your spouse, and if they don't ask any other questions, I'll just arrange a time and date. I'll give them my fee. I'll tell them my basic fee policy, and I'll give them directions to my office. Now, if parents will often ask you, can you tell me a little bit about how you? Can you tell me a little bit about yourself or how you work, and how you work? Now, about myself, I tell them as little as they want. Usually, they just want to know that you are competent, you're a professional, and that you know what you're doing. And so I tell them a little bit about how long I've been in practice. I might tell them, a little bit about my training, but again, not more than 30 seconds. If they ask me about how I work, I'll tell them two things. I'll say that the first step that we're going to get in, the first step of this process is to do a very thorough assessment. And the thorough assessment that we're going to do is based on two premises. Number one is that children have difficulty telling us what's wrong. So unlike adults who can more or less tell us what is going on inside and what hurt, quote unquote, what hurts, children have a limited capacity to do that. And as a result of that, we're going to need to spend a good deal of time getting a sense of what is really going on and what is actually and what is bothering the child inside. The second premise that I work with is that that children are influenced by all their different miskarot, all their different contexts. And so as a result of that, we're going to be looking at a lot of the different, we're going to be looking at all the different contexts of the child, and that's going to take some time. That's what I'll tell them about my approach. Yeah?
The second part, I don't understand.
You don't understand the second part. The second part is basically a way of talking about family systems. It's a palatable way of saying it's a palatable way of saying that your child is not just a fuk, that there are things that are influencing the child, and I want to get and I'd like to get in order to do a good assessment, I'm going to need to get a good sense of all the child's different miskarot, and I'll usually leave it at that. Now, one of the important things to recognize when parents come to you around the child is that parents are going to come inherently resistant and defensive about to the therapeutic process. Again, society gives us, at least contemporary society, gives very clear messages about whose fault it is when children have problems. And so when parents come to therapy, one of the questions that's going to be on their mind is, to what extent is this therapist going to blame me for my child's problems? And we need to be sensitive of that when we interact with parents, and to give over the basic message, whether it's expressed verbally or non-verbally, that you are an important component in the development of whatever is going on in the child, but it's not your fault. right? The basic premise of family therapy is that the idea of blame is a nonsensical concept, right? This is what we talked about in the introduction. That the basic premise of family systems is that things work circularly. And so placing blame at the foot of one person or two people is an overly simplistic and reductive concept. And so it's something that I actually believe deeply, and it's something that I want to impart when I'm initially meeting with parents. Okay, any questions about the phone call? Okay.
You said this was the first step. Could you talk with them about what the next step is after you've assessed what the issue is?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Meaning, you said that they call up and they're anxious and so
Right.
on. If you tell them that the first step is a thorough assessment
Right.
based on the two premises. I'm channeling my inner anxious parent right
Yeah.
now, and I'm thinking, and then what do you do?
So I won't go beyond the phone again. Thank you. The question was that. So I tell them about the first step, which is going to be the assessment, and then parents are presumably going to be saying to themselves, "Well, okay, and then what?" And do I speak to them about what will go on after that on the phone? And the answer to that is no. I don't typically. I've found that parents are, if I give parents sort of like a basic, if parents ask me about what my approach is and I give them sort of a very, very basic overview, like that will usually be enough to calm the anxiety until that first session. The first session, I'll usually get into more detail, but again, I'm going with an approach, in terms of the phone call, I'm going with an approach of less is more.
But in the phone call, you are assuming that they're expecting to be blamed, and you
Yes.
ask them about that in the phone call?
No, the question was in the phone call. Am I assuming that they're going to be blamed, and do I initiate a discussion with them about this in the phone call? I don't initiate a discussion about them. I will assume that that parents are calling up with defensive-ness because that's what's natural. But I won't initiate if the phone call goes like this. Hi, this is so-and-so. I got your name from so-and-so. I heard you work with kids. Is that true? I say, yes, that is true. Would you be able to see my 7-year-old boy? He's having problems with blah, 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 blah. And I say, sure, the first step is for me to meet with you and your spouse. And they say, okay, where's your office? And I give them my office number. You know, my fee is such and such. The policy around fee is such and such. And they say, okay, goodbye. That's a great phone call for me. For me, it's fantastic. What I'm talking about here is if parents, if they say, do you work with kids? And I say, yes. My child is having such and such problem. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Can you tell me a little bit about your approach? So there again, I want to be responsive. I don't want to listen. Presumably one could say, well, I'll talk to you more about that when we meet. I feel like that's shutting. I want to be somewhat responsive to the parents' curiosity and anxiety, and so this is my way of compromising, sort of not going into number one, protecting my time, but also not getting into a counterproductive therapy session over the phone. And so this is sort of the compromise that I make, that I found to be useful when parents ask for more information.
So can I just ask?
Well,
Will you
meet with just one parent, or will you insist on both?
I will never meet with. I meet with one parent? I'm really not good at this today. Will I meet with one parent, or will I be okay with meeting with one parent, or will I insist on two? When parents are married, I will insist on both parents being there, and that's actually a hard and fast rule that I make. I will not meet with one parent. When parents are divorced, I won't meet with the parents together. Now, just a technical piece here. If parents are divorced, one of the things that you already should be inquiring about over the phone is whether the spouse who is not calling will be okay with, will give any shore for therapy. One of the things you really, really want to avoid is getting into a situation where you meet with one parent and then the other parent refuses to to take part or give an ishur for therapy. So already on the first phone call, I'll be explaining. If parents tell me if the parent tells me that they're divorced, or even separated, even there's a legal distinction there, but I don't really care about the legal distinction. Even if they're separated, I will inquire with the parent about the other parent. Would they be willing to be part of the process? And would they be willing to? Are they going to be willing to give an ishur for treatment?
If the parents are divorced and they want to come together, why would you refuse to see them?
So if both parents are, the question was, if both parents are divorced and they want to come together, why would I refuse to see them? What I've found, I've done that and I've regretted it. I found it's just, divorced parents. Listen, I'm sure not. I'm sure. I know that there are many divorced parents who co-parent in ways that are really nice and amenable, but there are also a lot that don't. And I don't want to get, when I'm in that initial meeting, I don't want to, if there are divorced parents, I don't want to get involved initially in acrimony that exists between the divorced parents. Again, usually, very often when you have in situations with divorce where there is a problematic child, the problematic child becomes a lightning rod for the conflict between the two parents, and that's something that I really don't want to get into.
You might meet them later on, the divorced parents.
It's possible I'll meet them together later on if I feel that it's warranted. Now, sometimes divorced parents will call in and say we want help on working on co-parenting, and that's something that's another matter altogether. I'll work, then I'll meet with them together. At least I'll meet with them together initially, at least as an assessment. But if they're calling in for their child, then I'll want to meet with each of them separately. There was a question.
Yeah, hi. I'm just thinking about the anxious parent that's calling, and you're quite to the point with them, and I respect your approach very much. But I'm wondering what that feels like for a parent, for you to say only so much and then stop, and then we'll talk about it in our first session.
Right.
I wonder how that feels for
Right.
someone.
So the question is an anxious parent calling in, and my approach is this less is more approach. How does that feel for the parent who is so anxious? So actually, what I found is that if I can maintain an empathic, again, I don't want to misrepresent this. I'm not saying like what the model of the first phone call that I just gave doesn't really sound like that. It's not, in other words, it's not. It doesn't sound as cut and dry and to the point as that. So I found that both things can be possible, where I can express a great deal of empathy and understanding for what they're going through, but not get into a long discussion over the phone. What I found is actually for parents who are very anxious, it's better to cut the phone call short. Because the longer you stay on the phone, the more that anxiety percolates, and it doesn't get resolved in that. The phone call doesn't give the parent what they're looking for. So I'll tell you, one of the things that often happens in the phone call is the parent will say, I know we're meeting on Tuesday, but Tuesday is 4 days away. Can you just give me advice on this? My son is this and this and this, yeah. And parents can be very, very persistent, and I don't get it. I won't get into to any advice giving over the phone. But so again, I don't want to give off the impression that I'm like I have my my watch out, like, okay, 2 minutes is up, goodbye. It's not as cut and dry as that, but again, I do try to minimize the amount of time I spend on the phone, and I find that actually has a way of containing anxiety.
Just, I'm wondering, if parents are divorced and one parent gives consent, do you still insist on meeting both parents?
The question is I think this is your question, that if the parents are divorced and the other parent will give consent, do I still insist on meeting both parents? That's a tricky question. The basic answer is yes. What you'll often have is one parent who, and again, this is just sort of the way that I found that it is that you'll often have one parent who is like against therapy, and if I get consent from that parent, then I will. If that parent has minimal involvement in the child's life, then I will continue with meeting with one parent. But I will do my very, very best to involve the other parent as well. Okay, we'll take one more question, then we'll move on.
If one of the parents calls you, they're married, and one of the parents calls you, they have a problem with the child has a problem, and not they have a problem with the child, not eating right, whatever it is, and they just want to start therapy. You always see the parents first, no matter, you never take a child just from one parent calling and seeing the child starting therapy.
So the question is, will I ever make an exception to this rule of meeting parents first? And the answer is no. I'll never make an exception. I have done that in the past, and I've always regretted it. Literally every single time that I've done that, I've regretted it.
There was always something that came up after that.
It didn't have to be a big thing that came up, but I always regretted it. So I will always meet with parents first. Okay. So now we get to the initial that initial meeting with parents. Now in this meeting, it's actually I actually don't treat it altogether that different from a meeting with a couple or a meeting with an individual. In this meeting, what I'm looking for is I'm looking to help the parents tell their story. Parents come in with a story about the child, and also implicitly a story about their family. And what I want to do in that initial session is help the parents tell that story. And so, at least at the very outset, I try to talk as little as possible. I'll usually begin the session saying something like, we spoke over the phone. I know you told me that you're having some problems with your child. Tell me about what's going on. And then I'll shut up for as long as the parents will talk, for the most part. Again, at that point, I really won't be asking many clarifying questions. I will really just let the parents tell me what is going on. I'll be taking notes the entire time. Now, simultaneously, I'm looking at how the parents are interacting. The first thing, I'll get to your question in 1 second. I'm looking at who is number one, who is telling me the story, and how does the parent who is not telling me the story relate to the parent who is. Are there back and forth? Do the parents allow does the couple allow each other to correct, make comments? Do I sense a level of rigidity and angst between the parents? This is the first information I'm getting about the family as a whole is while the parents are telling me about their child. This question over here.
Yeah, I was wondering. Sometimes, I guess parents want to be protective of their kids, so they make it seem like the issue is less. How would you pick something like that?
The question is, sometimes the parents are anxious about their kid and want to make it and want to minimize the problem and make it seem like the problem isn't as big. I've actually found the opposite. Usually, parents want to prove to me how bad things are. And they're, again, unless we're dealing with a case where somebody has been mandated, for the most part, parents are coming in and they've been holding this for so long, and they want to say, basically what they want to tell me is, we need you to acknowledge just how horrible this is. Now, what parents will often do, and parents have picked up that you're supposed to start with your child's strengths, and parents will often say, almost always, and it's a nice thing. When parents don't do this, it's sort of, my antenna go up. Parents will often start with, Yankel is a great kid. These are all the ways that he is great. And they'll sort of go through a list of 3 things, and they'll say, but, and then go through what the problem is. I think that's it's a nice thing. I try, when I reflect, I will try to, I will make sure to reflect the positive qualities of the parents also. And again, it reflects an ability for the parents. It reflects an ability for the parents to see the positive aspects of their child. I mean, it probably also reflects the expectation that they're anticipating for me that they will start with something nice. But I think that's often you again. Usually, how these sessions go is parents will say, he's brilliant, he's great, he's this, and this, but this is what's going on. So again, I'm letting the parents tell their story. Usually, that now, if one parent tells the story and the other is quiet, usually stereotypically, this will be the wife telling the story and the husband nodding. Sorry, we'll deal with stereotypes a little bit here. So if that's the case, I will make a point of turning to the spouse that has been less verbal and saying, "Tell me how you think. Tell me what your perspective on all this. Your wife has articulated what's going on. I'm interested in your thoughts here." And again, I really won't do more than that. I won't push the other spouse more than that. I really want to get a sense of where the more silent spouse is at. And I'm also the other thing that I'm assessing for in that moment is there significant resistance on the part of the more silent spouse to coming to therapy? In other words, is this a point of contention between the parents? Is coming to therapy a point of contention between the parents? Because that's something. If there's a strong sense that it is, that's something that needs to be addressed from the first session. Now again, it doesn't need to be addressed in that moment, but at some point in the first session, if you are sensing that there's strong resistance coming from one spouse, that needs to be addressed right off of the bat.
And if the silent spouse says, "Really, I would prefer to deal this on my own, but my wife is forcing me to come," so if the spouse is just open and says, again, usually the spouse will not be that open, but if the spouse is open and say, this therapy thing is just not for me, and I think it's all a bunch of baloney. So the question is, what do I do with that? I mean, usually what I'll do with that, I'll say something like, tell me more about that. And at that point, the discussion moves from, if the conflict between the parents, or if the disagreement between the parents is so blatant, the focus of the discussion will move from the child to the parents. Because there's nothing that I'm going to be able to do with the child until I have at least some level of buy-in from both parents. And so at that point, I would want to get a discussion going between the parents as to, so I might ask them, I'm sure this isn't the first time that you have discussed this difference of opinion here. Can you just update me about the discussions you've had about this? How have you talked about your disagreement here? And again, I don't have any expectation about where this is going to go. And also, I won't take the position of trying to convince the other spouse that they should be going to therapy. That's usually counterproductive. But at that point, I'll just want to get a discussion going about this disagreement. So be willing to, so to speak, abandon the focus on the child and do couples therapy as long as it takes.
So I'm not doing couples therapy there. Again, if it moves to, let's say if it goes something like this, which has happened, if it moves to, the wife says, "This is what's going on," spends 10 minutes talking about the child. I say to the husband, "Tell me about what you think," and he says, "Well, actually, you know what? Really, I think therapy is a bunch of baloney." And I say, "Why don't you can you tell me a little bit more about that?" And there's a discussion going on between the two of them, and then they start talking about between the antipathy and the conflict that exists between the two of them, even outside of the child. What I'll often, if we get to that level, I'll say something like, I think we are talking about something different than what you came in with, and I wonder if this is something that's going to need to be addressed first. And so I'll be explicit about, before doing couples therapy, I'll be explicit about, do we need to change the frame here of what you came in here in order to get to your desired goal. And then that might be a discussion about either continuing with me, and continuing this discussion, focus on the couple with me, or referring them out for couples therapy. Okay, yeah.
if there is a silent parent, right, not a resistant parent, willing with the
Yeah.
to go with her, but silent, would that preclude you treating the child?
The question was if there's a silent parent but that's not resistant, would that preclude me treating the child? No, it would. That would not. If my assessment is that the silence is just shyness or culture or Asperger's, if that's my assessment, that won't preclude me from working with a child. What I will do is keep that in mind and try to include the silent parent as much as possible.
Sometimes it could be a silent parent, but just allowing the other parent to take place the lady to speak or whatever. That's also something.
Yeah, but again, it could be a silent parent that's just allowing the other parents the room to take care of this. But that is indicative of larger family dynamics. Even saying something like that it may not have anything to do with resistance to therapy, but that's important information in terms of the system of the family. Okay, so at a certain point, usually what happens is the parents will sort of say what they came in to say. They will have told me the basic story, and that could take 3 minutes, that could take 20 minutes. And again, I will try to take an approach of non-interference to the extent possible. At that point, when I feel sort of like they have told me the story, I will do I will make like a long reflection of what they have said to me. I'll say, I want to make sure that I understand what you're coming in with, and I will sort of take a look at my notes and essentially sort of summarize whatever it is that I have written down, and turn to them and say something to the extent of, have I gotten that right? And usually that will prompt a little bit more of, that'll prompt a little bit more. They'll tell me a little bit more about what's going on. But at a certain point, we'll sort of they'll say, yeah, that's more or less the story. At which point, I now sort of like it's my turn. I will be more directive in asking questions and clarifying and gathering information. Now, what are the domains that I want to ask about? So, the first thing that I want to know about is what's going on at home. To what extent is there opposition at home? To what extent is there acrimony at home? To what extent is the child cooperative? How are they interacting with siblings? During that initial session, I will take a basic genogram of the immediate family, the nuclear family, getting a sense of all the children in the family, and a 2-minute a 2 or 3 sentence description of each child and their interactions with the IP. So I'm trying to get a sense of what goes on at home. I will ask about the parents. What specific difficulties are there with the child? When are things most difficult? Are there times of day that are problematic? Really trying to get a basic, sort of like overarching picture of what happens at home, and sort of like the dynamics that revolve around the IP. I will ask. I might ask about the Shabbos table. One of the things I'll ask about at home, I'll make sure to ask about, is a couple of things. I will always ask at a certain point in that initial session. I'll say to the parents, what I'd like for you to do now is to just give me a rundown. Like, choose in the last 2 weeks a particularly difficult instance that took place between you and your child, and in painstaking detail, from the time before the outburst until it calmed down, what happened. And there I do lots of tracking. So parents will usually give me like a very broad summary. He came up for he was really calm. He came to dinner. We didn't have what he liked, and he cursed me out, and then he ran up to his room. And I'll say, okay, I want to take you back through this and go through step by step. Okay, he came to dinner. What was his mood like? What did he seem like? Did anything happen before that was significant? Then what did he when he came to dinner? What did he say? What did you say? What was the response? How did you interact? When was the first time that you saw that he started to get a little bit annoyed? How long did that last? So in other words, I'm trying to get in sort of painstaking detail. I'm trying to track the difficult interactions between the parent and the child, and again, I'm looking for interaction that is symbolic of the larger issue. The other thing that I want to get in that initial session is if we're talking about a younger child, I want to get an outline of their day, like what's their basic schedule. And the other piece that I want to look for, that I want to clarify about home life is, are there positive interactions? Can you think back over the past 2 weeks? Can you tell me about a positive interaction that took place between you and the IP? Yeah.
Is that without the use of a book or activity? That are you talking about interaction, pure just discussion between you and the child?
I'll take any. The question is does this have to be an activity, or should this not be a specific activity? I'll take anything. In other words, I'm just asking. Tell me about a positive. It's when you have an IP where there's real tension. It's surprising how often parents will come in and say, over the past 2 weeks, I really can't think of any positive interaction we've had. So the first thing I'm looking for is are there positive interactions? But beyond that, I'm looking for what constitutes a positive interaction in the parent's mind, and how do they think about that? What do the parents do to promote that? So again, the first domain that I'm looking for is what goes on at home. The second domain is what goes on in school. And again, just asking you basic questions. How does the child performing academically? Does the child enjoy going to school? Does the child give you problems going to school? Has the school come back with any complaints? And then connected to that, I ask about friends. The child's social structure. Number one, does the child have friends? Number two, what's the nature of the child's friendships? Does the child initiate contact with kids his own age? Or does the child only play with children either younger or older? All this is important information. These are the basic domains that I am looking at and trying to get an assessment of. The other piece that I'll also ask about is any previous therapy. Has the child been in therapy? Has the child or anyone else in the family been in therapy in the past? Have there been difficulties with any other children, or are any other children in therapy currently? Yeah.
The thing you said about asking for the worst thing that happened in the last 2 weeks, does that often come up in the initial, when you ask them to tell the story? And if it does, you don't go into detail then? The question is, doesn't, when I ask about the worst thing that's happened over the past 2 weeks, doesn't that usually just come up? Not necessarily. In the beginning, I'm saying, right? Don't the parents just say that automatically? If it does, I'm saying if it does.
So if it does, I still ask about that. I won't necessarily ask about that specific instance.
Uh-huh.
I will ask for a particularly difficult instance over the past 2 weeks, because typically when parents bring this up, there are parts of the interaction that they're not talking about. They're usually giving a broad outline of what took place, and what I'm really looking for is the particularities and sort of like the blow by blow of what took place, because that's usually where all the information lies. So if the parent says, he came up for dinner, and then he threw this huge, and he didn't like what it was, and so he he threw this huge fit. There's lots of information missing there about, he came in, he came for dinner, he asked for, he wanted chicken nuggets and there was no chicken nuggets. And he said, you never care about me, and you never make what I like. Like that's the most important piece of the whole interaction. And again, there are usually just basic things that are missed, often sensitive aspects that we really need to know about if we're going to address this stuff. Okay, now at the end of I try to leave a couple minutes at the end of that initial session. Yeah.
Sorry. What happens if the parent says that there's been no negative interaction? They can't think of anything.
What happens if the parents say that there's no negative interaction or that they can't think of any?
No, I had that.
You had that. I've actually never had that. Right. Okay, so that's a different. So we're talking about a different. We're talking about a different case. Your case was it was a school. It was a school-based problem, and there was never a problem. It was fine at home.
According to the parents.
Right. So I will. So there I will push back. I will try to clarify a little bit, and I might sort of just clarify. What I'm asking. Like is there ever any times where there's tension? It doesn't have to be a massive a temper tantrum, but there are things that you don't agree upon, or if the parents say no, everything has always been everything is perfect. So that is information for me, because that, frankly, it doesn't exist. And again, I won't make any hard and fast conclusions about what that means, but it's important information. Yeah.
Just a question in general, like how do you work with parents and kids? Do you ever see the parent with the child at the same time? Or is it always like the parents first and then the kid alone? It's
so the question is, do I ever work with the parents and the child together? So once we get to treatment, the answer to that is yes. If the question is, will I ever just see the parents and the child together initially? Listen, I have cases where families call in saying we want family therapy, and depending on what the nature of the so there I will usually just invite the whole family in initially. But again, this is an important question. One of the utilities of this model is that parents almost never call in saying we want family therapy. Parents will almost always call in saying we want you to see our child, or our child is having difficulty and we need that fixed. If you'll notice, one of the things that I am doing in this initial meeting is I am going full steam ahead with the IPing of this child, right? In other words, I am talking about this child almost exclusively. I'll spend a little bit of time on the rest of the family, but I am colluding with the IPing of the child, and I'm doing that on purpose. The reason that I'm doing that is because if the parents come in and I say, my child is having a problem, and I say, I hear that, but we're going to focus on your family right now, then I'm just not being where the parents are on any level. So the model here is based on the assumption that parents are coming in with that the IPing of the child serves a family function, and that's a family function that we need to respect. But again, if there's a family that I'm seeing now that called in saying, we want, we're having problems with our entire family. There's a lot of tension in the family, and we'd like to all come in to see you together, and that's great. I enjoy those cases, but they're few and far between.
You don't feel like the parents, like when you're asking questions about like the dynamics, that the parents lie to you because they don't want to say things in front of their kids?
Do I feel that when? do I feel like if I'm seeing the whole family together, do the parents lie because they don't want to say certain things in front of their kids?
Yeah, like a kavaseta, everything's fine or whatever.
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course. I never assume, even in individual therapy, that my clients are telling me everything. People are complex, and we share things in stages, and we are concerned about the context of what we're sharing and how it's going to be, how it's going to impact. And so, for sure, the point of therapy is not for people to reveal everything about themselves. The point of therapy is to help people with their problems. And so even if I'm not all that concerned about people, about parents. Again, it's preferable, I suppose. But that's not my focus. Okay. Now at the end. One more question. We'll move on. Yeah.
If you and the parents decide together that they need couples therapy, and they want to do it with you,
yeah,
would you see the kid at the same time individually?
Okay. The question is if the parents decide that if me and the parents decide we're going to do couples therapy, would I also see the child? It's a massive question. It speaks to this is one of the big questions in family therapy is how much can the family therapist do? And so this is relevant to questions of if I'm seeing a couple, will I also see one of the spouses individually? Will I if I'm seeing a family, will I see one member of the family individually as well? I hate this. Sounds like I feel like it's sort of a cop-out answer, but that's really a case-by-case basis based on what is going on specifically. So there's a family that I'm seeing now where I'm seeing the couple, and I'm also seeing the one child individually, and really the rationale there was that in order to me seeing the child individually really is all about calming the parents' anxieties. In other words, they could focus on their own relationship to the extent that they feel like their child is being taken care of. There's a question there of do I refer the child out or do I refer the couple out? But so these are all complex questions that are really that this is why we go to supervision and sort of work this stuff out on a case-by-case basis. But you really asked sort of like the one of the questions of family therapy. Okay, at the end of that initial session, I tried to give the parents a little bit more information about what we're going to do from there, where we're going to go from here, and so I will outline what the assessment looks like. Now, what the assessment looks like, I'll just tell you now, because unfortunately I don't know if we're going to get to everything. What the assessment looks like is I tell the parents I'm going to meet with you one more time, and that's going to be if there's any other questions that I have about your child, but that we'll clarify it there. But mostly what I wanted to speak to you about is I want to get to know the two of you a little bit better. In that second session, what I'm doing is genogram work with the parents. I'm taking a history with the parents. Now, sometimes the parents will sort of say, like, what does that have to do with us? We're coming for our kid. And typically what I'll simply tell the parents is children are functions. Children's behavior is a function of their larger environment, and it's important for me to get a history of where your child is coming from. Now, again, if you see here, I'm still colluding with the IPing. I'm not saying I need to get to know the two of you better so we could figure out all your psychopathology. Again, so there's a collusion with the IPing in an effort to ensure that the parents feel like I'm respecting and recognizing that this child really is indeed a difficult kid. And then I'll ask the parents if they have any questions for me, and that's about it. I'll also, if there's any viture, so if there are confidentiality waivers that need to be signed, I'll do it in that at the end of that session as well. But again, it's important to leave a couple of minutes at the end in order to sort of work out these details. There's a lot to get to in these during this assessment. Time management is an important tool here. Yeah.
How long do you do your first session?
How long is the first session? An hour. I'll give a full hour instead of 50 minutes.
And if the parents are talking the entire time, will you at a certain point say, I think I have a basic picture now, I have some questions for you, or will you allow...
Right, so the question is if the parents are, if I give the parents time to tell their story and they're really good at telling stories, will I cut them off at some point? Yes, I will. I don't have a hard and fast rule for how long I'll let the parent, mostly it's, excuse me. Would someone mind just getting me a cup of water? Thank you. Mostly it's when sort of my brain tells me like this is no longer productive. That's sort of, yeah. No, it's fine.
Okay. I just was thinking the opposite of the client that was coming, that's saying there's nothing wrong at home, it's all at school. If you had an opposite case and there's nothing wrong at school and it's all at home, and the parents are feeling they're coming in, they don't want to be blamed, but they're being responsible and saying, yes, there's tension at home. Where do you go? It's a fine line, isn't it, between the blame and the responsibility.
Mm-hmm. So the question is what happens when there are no problems in school but lots of problems at home. That's actually a lot more common.
Right.
Again, I will trust my empathy there. That even if the problems are located strictly at home, I will trust my empathy based on the theoretical perspective of circular causality and systemic thinking that doesn't blame the parents. If parents come to me and say that there are problems at home only, so I'll probably make some type of assumption that something's going on at home and the kids are getting something at school that they don't get at home. What doesn't follow for me is you parents are bad parents. And I'll just trust sort of that's my outlook, and it'll be communicated in some way. I'm just sorry. If you could just hold your question because I want to move on because we're running low on time. Okay, so I'm not going to go into detail about the parent session, the session, the history taking. Really, I'm trying to get a history that focuses. That's again, this is where my theoretical perspective shines through. I'm really focused on attachment. I want to find out about the parents' attachment histories. And so I'm asking questions about the ability to communicate distress. I'm asking questions about nurturance. I'm asking questions about attachment figures outside of the nuclear family. All in an effort to sort of get a sense of what type of attachment are we dealing with these parents. At the end of I will when I'm taking this history, I will speak to each parent individually. In other words, I will take a history with one parent, move over and take a history with the other parent. And at the end of my history taking with each parent, I will ask them, the question that I always end off with is, how do you understand how do you understand how your history or how your childhood has impacted you as a parent? In what ways has your childhood impacted you as a parent? Now, that's a complex question that some parents can't answer. It's usually an important question, but it's a question that not all parents can answer. And if parents struggle with that, I will say, I have a different question for you.
Can you repeat the first question?
The question is, in what ways has do you feel that your childhood has impacted who you are as a parent? If they can't answer that question, then I'll say I have a different question for you. When you think back to your own childhood, what are the things that you tried that as a parent you tried to adopt into your own family, and what are the things that you tried to sort of not adopt, that you tried to push away? There's something more concrete about that question that's a little bit easier to answer. Now at the end of that, okay. Now after the two parent sessions, again, usually it's two parent sessions. I will, if there's tons of information to cover, I will meet with parents for a third time. In other words, if in that first session we've only covered, we've only covered, we haven't covered enough, and I have more questions to ask, I'll feel free to say to the parent, I think we're going to need another 2 sessions. Again, I try not to do that because parents don't want to be in this assessment phase for 6 months. And again, I want to be respectful to the parents' desire to sort of move on, let's get going. The next stage after those two parent meetings is a meeting with the entire family. Excuse me, that's wrong. The next stage after that meeting with the 2 parents is when I'm dealing with a child under 12, I will do a school observation. In the school observation, speaking about time management. So I'm not going to go into the school observation because it's a skill that needs to be developed in and of itself. But I find that it's actually an important component of getting a sense of, again, when I talk about getting a sense of the child in the different miskarot, observing the child in school is an important aspect of getting a whole picture of the child. Again, what I'll say about the school observation is I will try to be in contact with the school and see about a half an hour or 25 minutes of class time and 25 minutes of hafsaka. So again, I'm getting a sense of both how the child works and plays in school.
Does the child know that you're the therapist at this point? No.
Again, this is why the reason I do the school observation at this moment, before the meeting with the family, is because I don't want the child to know who I am. That's also why I don't do school observations with children over 11 or 12, because children over 11 or 12 will feel, when they come and see me, they'll feel a little bit violated, betrayed. It's funny. What I found is that children younger than 11 will often come into the family meeting and say, "Hey, you were in my school." And I'll just say, "Yep, I was."
If when you're letting the parents talk or you're taking the information, there's problems in the communication. Either there's subtle blaming or somebody insists on giving every single detail or whatever. Do you get into the actual work or do you just ignore that?
So the question is if I'm noticing that in my discussion with the parents that there are sort of subtle interactions or subtle blaming that's going on, do I sort of move into that or do I just keep on going? The answer to that is I will only go into the couple's relationship if I feel that it is interfering with the possibility of moving on to the focus to working with the child. Again, and that's predicated on my assumption that parents are not coming in to talk about they're not coming in to me to talk about their relationship. And so if they come in and I say, "Listen, we need to talk about what's going on between the two of you," that's a very different perspective than what the parents are coming in with. I'll only do that if I feel that it's going to interfere with the actual work. Now that doesn't mean at the very, very end, when I give my feedback, those things that I've noticed may be important parts of my feedback. But at the outset, I will do everything I can to not move the focus off of the child. Okay, last question, then we'll move on.
Will you choose a particular class to sit in on based on what you've been told by the parents?
Will I choose a particular class to sit in on?
Based on what they've told you, maybe
the question is, will I choose a particular class to sit on based on what the parents have told me? To be quite honest, usually I'll do it based on what fits into my schedule. Again, I want to see hafsaka and school, but after that, it's I just try to fit it into my schedule. I don't have enough flexibility to go beyond that. But it's certainly a nice idea. It really never occurred to me, but that actually makes sense. Okay, so at the end now, again, I'm jumping back and forth a little bit here. At the end of the second parent meeting, before ending, the therapist needs to talk to the parents about the next stages, specifically what they're going to tell their kids about the meeting with the family. Now, here's what I don't have a set script. but I will tell. I will talk to parents. I will make sure to talk to parents about what they're going to say. Now, usually, I will try to guide the parents to saying to not IPing their child, to saying something sort of more broad about why we're going in. We're going to see somebody who works with families when there is tension. If there are, if it's a family filled with, if it's a family of very young children, sometimes I'll recommend the parents saying, we're going to see somebody who works with families about big feelings. I've had parents saying, I think we're going to tell our kids that we're going to see a feelings doctor. And I say, that's fine with me also. But again, so I'm less concerned with exactly what is said, and more concerned that the parents have a nusach to bring to their kids that they could explain this. Now, some parents will tell me it's going to be like we could give a general a description of why we're coming to see you to our kids. Everybody's going to know. And if the parents say that, I won't counter that. I'll say I'll trust their judgment there. And if the parents feel that they need to explain to their family, we're going because Johnny is having because Johnny's having problems, I'll go with that. I'll have them add on sort of like a family frame to that. That Johnny's having problems, and we're all family. We all, because we're a family, we deal with this together. So in other words, it's putting a family frame and like dampening the IPing of the IP. Okay. So now the stage that we're up to now is the family meeting. Running a meeting with a family is a skill that needs to be developed. The first thing that needs to be developed is calming our own anxiety, because a lot of the families that we're seeing are really, really big families, and they come in and it's like a whirlwind has entered your office. And so the first thing the therapist needs to do is to sort of like get settled, sort of like as a therapist, I need to settle myself and recognize like things are going to be okay. We're going to be able to contain whatever comes up. We're going to be able to contain this. The family is going to come in. Now, speaking of anxiety, the family is coming in with massive anxiety. And that's the first thing to recognize is that no matter how the family presents itself, they are coming in with massive anxiety. The parents are coming in with the anxiety of, are we being judged? How are we being judged? How are our kids going to act here? The kids are coming in with the anxiety of, I don't really know what's going on here. Who is this person? What's gonna happen here? And so we need to pay attention to our presence, which again, it's there's nothing complex here. Our presence should be a friendly, kind, empathic presence. We should. The idea here is to make this inviting, and that starts with how we greet that starts with how we greet the family. Now, again, I want to differentiate between inviting and no boundaries. Part of containing the anxiety is containing the family, is providing the boundaries for the family. So when a family comes in, if I see the family having a difficult time sitting down, I will say, it's really, really nice to meet you. I'll turn to mom and dad and I'll say, let's get everybody to sit down so we can talk for a little bit. So the first step of the meeting with the family is I'll introduce myself. So I'll tell everybody a little bit about who I am, and then I'll say I'd like to do a short hekerut so I can get to know all of you. And depending on the family, on the age of the children, that's how I'll frame the hekerut. So if I'm dealing with young kids, I might say something like, "Tell me your name, how old you are, and something you like to do when you get back from school, and your favorite ice cream flavor." Again, so if we're dealing with kids that are, the entire member of if all the kids are under 9 or 10, I'll do something like that. If there's a 17-year-old, I'm not going to ask them what their favorite ice cream flavor is. And so again, we're framing this to meet the developmental needs of the children that are in front of us. And again, I'll go around. I'll give I'm making eye contact with each member of the family. I'm making a connection with each member of the family. I'm asking them questions. I'm clarifying. I'm making comments about what each one of them says. After that, I will I'll turn to the kids and ask them if they know why they're here. And here it's always interesting to compare and contrast what you've spoken about with the parents and what the kids are coming in and telling you. And it's almost never the same thing. What the kids come in and say why they're in therapy is really, I think I could sort of I could name I could count on my fingers the number of times it's been the exact same thing. Usually somewhere in the pool of anxiety, the kids come out with a different message, and that's an opportunity to talk about this. It's an opportunity to talk about why it is we're here. And if the kids just stay silent, usually what I'll do is I'll turn to the parents and say, Mom and Dad, can you tell, it seems like your kids are unsure. Can you tell them a little bit about why we're here? Now, depending on the age of the kids and depending on how verbal the family is, that might lead into a discussion about why it is we're here, and that actually could be a port of entry into discussing some of the issues at hand. Now, the primary thing that I'm assessing for at this moment in time is to what extent this family can engage with me verbally. How much can I talk with this family? And and there's a huge discrepancy between. There's this huge range in terms of how verbal the family can be and how much we can base the session on discussion. There are some families, even with young kids, that could come in and they just start talking. And if that's the case, I'll go with them. I'll talk with them. But there are some families, again, even with older kids, that really it's really uncomfortable for them to engage with me verbally, and that will be a sign for me that I need to engage with them in other nonverbal ways. Now, to the extent that they'll engage with me verbally, I might speak with them about why they're in therapy. If I feel like they need a prompting question, I will ask. I'll ask two questions in succession. The first thing I'll ask is, I'd like to go around and for everybody to tell me one thing that they really like about their family, about your family. Again, this is coming from a strengths perspective, beginning with the positive. And again, it's also interesting to see, can people tell us, can people tell me what they like about their family? And I'll go around again during this family meeting. I'm trying to make connections with each member of the family. I'll go around, give each person their own time, give each person time to give me an answer and to talk about that answer. I'll try to stimulate some discussion within the family. What do you think about that? Is that something that you agree with? When we're done with that, I will go back around and I'll ask, can you tell me about one thing that you'd like to change in your family? And again, same principle. I go around, and at this point, number one, I will bring a pad. I'll keep a pad with me on the side, so I could just jot down things because they're often really important things that the family will say, and don't expect to remember anything that happens during the family meeting. In Neve, the Pinat Hayelet has the luxury of having an observation team. But when you're doing this yourself, you don't have, I would assume, you don't have that luxury. And so so it's important to just, even though I don't like having a pad with me when I'm meeting with a family, I'll sort of keep it in a nondescript place and just sort of jot down quick notes so that I don't lose everything after the session.
What is your attitude towards recording the conversation?
I never record the conversation. The question was, what about recording the conversation? I never record the conversation. Working as a private therapist, I don't want to deal. There are potential legal consequences of recording sessions that I don't want to deal with. Even again, you could get consent, but beyond that, people get very uncomfortable when they're recorded. So you oftentimes will get uncomfortable when they're recorded, and beyond that, I don't have the time to listen to a recording afterwards. So I don't record the sessions.
This is in your office, the family session?
Yeah, this is in my office. Okay, so again, the family. I'm talking with the family about things they like, things that they would want to change. Again, it's trying to stimulate discussion. I don't want it to only be a discussion between me and the person that I'm speaking to. I want to get the family engaged in some type of interaction. Number one, because there's often interesting material that emerges from that, but I also want to observe there's interesting verbal material that emerges from that. But even beyond that, I want to get to see the interactions between the family members. Now, after that, I will ask after we have spoken about that, the things that they like, the things that they would want to change. If the family is still engaging with me verbally, I'll just keep on talking to them. If I feel like they need some nonverbal material to engage them with, I will ask them to draw a picture of their family. Now, I've gone back and forth with this. There's different ways of doing this. In the past, I used to ask the family to draw a picture of a family, which is a more sort of projective type of drawing. At this point, I ask the family to draw a picture of their family. That gives you again, coming from an attachment perspective, that gives you a better picture of the nature of the attachment in this specific family. You can go either way with that. There are advantages and disadvantages to both. I give a significant amount of time for the family to do their drawing. Again, I'm observing. The one other instruction is I say that the one instruction here is that if you know how to draw people that are not stick figures, you can't draw stick figures. Again, that puts a little bit more pressure on the family member, but it increases the richness of what you get out of the drawings.
Are you having individuals do the drawing, or the family collab?
No, I'll give a piece of paper to each person. I'll give like an A4 paper to each person to do the drawing, and including the parents. The parents are often surprised when I say, "Mom and Dad, you too," but the parents are doing the drawing as well. Now, okay, so I give the family members time to draw. Now, this is a great time for me as a therapist, to step back and observe, because I'm not doing anything. I don't have to run things, and so I'm observing what's going on. And there's really, all this is data. Who is helping who? Who's copying from who? Who puts lots of effort into their drawings? Who's just getting it over with? Who is protective of their drawing? Who is excited about this? Who is really resistant and reluctant?
Drawing anxiety. Most families are willing to cooperate. Parents as well.
For the most part, the families are willing to cooperate. Oftentimes, you'll have a teenager who sort of says, "This is stupid, and I'm not doing this." And again, I won't get into any confrontation. I'll speak with the teenager to the extent possible, but I won't get into a confrontation. Sometimes I'll ask the parent, how would you like to proceed? I'll ask the parents, how would you like to proceed? Do you want to speak to your child about doing the drawing? And I'll leave it at that.
How often in your sessions is it working like this fluid, like it just kind of flows this smooth without things coming up? You're giving a very fluid succession of events
right.
over here. How often does that actually?
How often does it happen fluidly, where sort of it goes from one to the other to the next?
Yeah.
It depends on what the definition of fluid is. I work hard to create structure to the session in order to contain anxiety. it almost never runs smoothly in the sense that you usually have a kid that runs off to do to play with the toys. A kid needs to go to the bathroom. One member of the family doesn't want to talk. So things come up because we're talking about families. But usually, I will work hard to make sure that there is a structure and a flow to the session, and I don't want to leave the family in a place where sort of like they're left hanging. Where I say, okay, look, what do you guys want to do? Actually, that's not true. There are times where I will do that, but it'll be in a structured way. I'll get to it. Yeah.
Is there always an IP?
The question is there always an IP? Usually there is an IP. Again, sometimes I'll have families, very rarely I'll have families that come in and say, we want to talk about, we're having problems all across the board and we want to come in and meet as a family and improve our relationships. But that almost never happens. Again, it just from a theoretical perspective, IPs are often important. They're important in maintaining structure and the systemic flow of the family.
When you ask everybody to say why they're coming in, wouldn't that be pointing the finger at the IP? I mean, if it's sort of like if they're coming in for the one.
So the question is, when I ask why they're coming in, wouldn't that be pointing a finger at the IP? So again, just to go back at the end of that second meeting with the parents, I will try to move them towards an explanation that is more general and less IP. Sort of something like we're coming to see somebody who deals with families when they're having issues.
I see. They're telling their children.
That's what they're telling their children. Now, if they don't, I'm okay with. In other words, I will assume that the family needs to IP this child, and if that's the case, then I want it brought out. It's better for that to be brought out than for it to be an elephant in the room. Yeah.
Are you going to be telling us how we're meant to interpret these pictures?
Not now, because that's there's literature on. There's lots and lots of literature on that. You could look up. You could look up. There's lots of attachment literature on the interpretation of family drawings. Okay, so they've done the family drawings. I'll say one more thing about this. I actually am less focused, this is just my approach, I'm less focused on the interpretation of the drawings. I'm more focused on the process of doing the drawings and what the children have to say about their drawings. So again, this is just, I wouldn't want somebody taking a picture that I drew and coming to conclusions about who I was. So it's sort of, I find it to be respectful to take the drawings with a grain of salt. That's what I'll say about that for now.
But what are you observing? The interaction of how it's done?
Yeah. So what I mentioned before, sort of how the people are drawing, how they're interacting during these drawings. Again, it's not that I'm ignoring the actual outcome of the. So if somebody draws a picture of a son, with a gun shooting the mother. That's never happened to me. But I'm saying, you can make assumptions there. Or if every family member, if there's like 2 inches between every family member, you can make that's information about the family. That this might be a more avoidant family that has more difficulty with intimacy. Again, I wouldn't draw a conclusion from that, but that would say, that's something that says they're shamey. I give each member of the family gets time to introduce and to explain their drawing, and I will work with the parents to. At this point, we're getting to the end of the session, and especially if you have little kids, people are getting restless, and I will work with the parents to help contain the family enough so that each person really has the space to talk about and present their drawings. Now, usually, for most families, this will be like we're getting to the end of the hour. If there's still time, what I will ask the family to do is to do an activity together. If they're like with like latency age and teenagers, I will take out puppets from my office and ask the family to put on a puppet show with a beginning, a middle, and an end. With younger kids, I will ask the family to build. I'll take out the like the toy animals and blocks. I'll ask the family to build a house for the animals. And again, there I'm seeing the way that the family can interact in a playful way. Do the parents get on the floor with the children? Which parents get on the floor? Is there the capacity for fun, playfulness? Are there children who are left out or keep themselves out? Again, these are all interactions that provide information. Okay, in this we're coming to the end now. I want to wrap this up. There's one more stage of the assessment that we're not getting into. That is an individual meeting with the child. I'll let you read. There's a lot of literature on how to conduct a meeting with the child. But again, this is sort of in line with respecting the need for the IPing of the child and going along with the parents' emphasis on this child in particular. Now, at this point, you should have lots and lots of information. You have information about the child, the description from the parents. You have information about the parents themselves. You've gone to the school and gotten information both from the teachers and from your observations about the child in school. You've gotten information about the family, and you've also met with the kid and gotten information there. That should provide this information should provide greater insight into the nature of the problem. Now, I wish we had more time so I could sort of go into greater depth about how this works. But all this using our theoretical background, this should give us a picture of the interactional nature of the problem. We should be able to draw a rough picture of that looks something like, if we have a circle where we have what the child feels, what the child does, right? So the child feels insecure. What the child does, he acts out. How that makes the parent feel. The parent feels incompetent, vulnerable. How the parent acts. I wish I had drawn this out for you guys. Sorry about that. How the parent acts in response to those feelings, and how the actions of the parents again impacts the child and exacerbates those initial feelings of the child. So again, we should be able to draw out for the parents the circular nature of the problem. So at this point, when we're providing the feedback, what we should be doing is we're still focusing on the child. We're not sort of saying the child is not the problem, you are. We're still focusing on the child, but we should be able, with the information that we've gathered, to expand the picture and move it not just have the spotlight on the child, but have the child's symptoms in context of what goes on around the child. Now, when you do this provides a greater framework a broader framework for the parents, and it allows us flexibility to intervene in ways that are not just individual sessions with the child. But again, our treatment plans should make sense, should be consistent with the conceptualization that we have given back to the parents. So in this feedback session, the first thing that I apologize for running through this. In the feedback session, the first thing that I'm doing with the parents is saying, listen, this is what I've seen, and this is how I understand the symptoms of your child. Your child feels this. He's acting like this, which causes the people around him to feel such and such, and then respond to him in such and such, which exacerbates those initial whatever those initial feelings are, which exacerbates the problematic behavior. Now, with that, I should be able to. There should be a treatment plan that doesn't just focus on the child. I should be able to have a treatment plan at the very least, even if the treatment plan is consistent with seeing the child individually, that also explains to the parents, I need to work with you as well. Because we can't just focus on this child, we also need to work on how the environment responds to the child. So again, that conceptualization should flow naturally into our treatment recommendations. Now, when I give that initial feedback, when I give my conceptualization, the first question I ask after that is, does this make sense to you? Are we speaking about the same kid? Now, let me take one step back. What I won't do, and don't do this, when you come back for the feedback, when the parents come in for that feedback session, don't say something like, "Tell me your thoughts about this process," or "What was this like for you?" Now, those sound like good therapeutic questions, but there's nothing that will piss parents off more than that question. Parents are waiting for your feedback. You have, again, this is an intensive assessment, and they are waiting with bated breath for what you have to say to them. So if you come in and say, "Tell me about what this experience has been like for you," there's really nothing that will get parents more annoyed than that. So again, I'm coming into the session with feedback. With feedback, and this takes preparation that should be done in supervision. Don't do this like 10 minutes before your session with the parents. You should have a conceptualization that you have developed, and that you have clear feedback to give the parents that encompasses the systemic nature of the problem, and from that should flow you check in with the parents if this makes sense, take into account any comments they have to that, and from this the treatment recommendations should flow naturally. Okay, we have time for one or two, so that's sort of this protocol that I work with. We can't take many questions.
Is that a session after you meet the child individually?
Yes, that session is after I meet with the child individually.
So how many recommendations would you like in the treatment plan?
So again, I'll make how many recommendations do I make? I try to keep it simple. Number one, the first recommendation is who are we going to be seeing, right? What's the constellation of therapy going to look like? And again, that should make sense in the context of my feedback. And again, I try not to say do this, I try not to give a list of 8 things that they should be doing at home. I will try to speak to them about things that can be done at home, but not. I'm very conscious, especially when we're dealing with big families, of not overwhelming parents at home. Okay, last question.
Can you just quickly go around that cycle again for us?
Yeah, the cycle starts. The cycle. What is that cycle? The cycle starts with the cycle doesn't start anywhere, but again, because it's a cycle. But the child's feelings, which cause the child to act in certain ways, which cause the people around the child to feel certain things, which cause them to, those feelings cause them to act, and the actions of the parents usually relate to those initial feelings. So, child feels insecure, he responds by acting out, and I'll give you an example. The parents feel insignificant and hopeless. They respond by yelling or screaming to feel some level of power, which exacerbates those initial insecure feelings of the child. Okay, thank you.